The year is 1889, and a small steam locomotive pulls a very special rail vehicle out of the Breslau workshops. To most, it was just the German Emperor's latest toy, but for the Prussian railways, it was the prototype of rail travel's future. The story of this exceptional piece of craftsmanship begins with a somewhat awkward situation the German monarchy found itself in during the late 1880s. The health of the German Emperor and King of Prussia, Wilhelm I, already well into his 80s at that point, was continuously declining, while his son and crown prince, Friedrich, was severely ill. All eyes were therefore on the Emperor's grandson, Prince Wilhelm. As de facto crown prince, was his own royal saloon coach long overdue, especially considering the older 2 and 3 axle coaches being very much outdated, and, looking through the eyes of the young Wilhelm, way too modest too. Development for an entirely new royal coach began in 1887, and for the railway, this was the perfect opportunity to include and test all the latest technology, proven or not, which should ultimately lead to the development of Prussia's first D-Zugwagen, express coaches with covered gangway connections. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So what has this new, fancy royal coach to offer? First and foremost, size. The new design dwarfed its predecessors, with 2 3-axle bogies and an overall length of 18.6 meters. Those bogies, however, were far from proven. While the lessons learned from this coach ultimately led to a proven standard design for 3-axle bogies, was the first iteration far from it. It rode rough, led to frequent royal complaints, and had to be replaced after just 5 years. And therefore it was also the reason subsequent royal coaches were laid out as lighter, just 4-axle vehicles until proper 3-axle bogies were finally available. But besides the size was also the paint scheme a bright contrast to the unassuming green or brown of older royal coaches. The lower half of the body was painted in Kaiserblau, think of royal blue, bordered in black, and the upper part surrounding the windows in white, which through layers of clear paint turned into an ivory-like shade, and was complemented by nut brown detailing. A paint scheme which became the prototype for generations of luxury trains in Germany. But while there is certainly no shortage of luxury in this coach, its available space, despite the size, actually quite limited. As the coach was initially intended to be used as a standalone vehicle, were also compartments for Wilhelm's entourage as well as servants included, resulting into not too much space left for the future emperor himself. The aforementioned compartments are very similar to a sleeping car, with the seats being able to be transformed into beds, and only the prince himself received a dedicated bedroom, including a proper steel-framed bed. And that room in turn connects to a secondary room, complete with toilet, sink, as well as an emergency door. The emergency door for the other side is on the corridor besides those 2 rooms, which is the reason why those rooms feel very cramped. And it's only the saloon itself which spans the whole width of the coach. That compromise had to be made, as on one hand, it wouldn't be acceptable for his entourage to have to walk through his private rooms before they met him in the royal lounge. But on the other hand, would the lack of a proper lobby adjacent to the saloon also not be adequate? It is important to understand that royal coaches are not just a comfortable means of traveling. They have just as much a representative function, and are therefore in every sense palaces on rails. Therefore also the need for a lobby complete with foldable chairs. This is underlined by the entrance to the lobby being much wider with foldable stairs and a lavish handrail, while on the other hand, the stairs are only partially foldable, as a result much steeper, and the handrail really is just a handhold. These smaller doors, however, are just as important, as they lead into the vestibule from which the secondary rooms for the entourage and servants respectively can be accessed, as well as a stove, providing warm water for the hydronic heating, as steam heating wouldn't be apt for a prince, right? Steam pipes are nonetheless present for the use together with steam-heated coaches. A much larger issue than getting the coach warm in winter, however, was to keep it cool in summer. you might have already noticed the overly thick roof on top of the clerestory. And indeed, it's made up of 2 layers, and in between can air freely circulate, preventing a lot of the heat from entering the coach. But just in case that's not enough, and it often was not enough, had Prussian engineers something even better. A white canvas was spread over the prince's rooms, and what looks like a handrail on top of the clerestory is something completely different entirely. It's a sprinkler, meant to evenly distribute a thin layer of water onto the canvas to maximize its cooling effect. And to make the heat prevention measures complete, also these somewhat clunky looking outside shutters were mounted, but only on the half occupied by the prince himself. They were designed removable to increase the route availability outside of Germany, which was for example needed in Austria, and for Austria also a second brake system was fitted. Removing and screwing the shutters back on was still a very tedious job, however. But talking about tedious, probably the most important feature are the ends, with their distinct porches. And the intention for these porches is indeed to connect up multiple coaches of a similar style. The gap in the floor would be covered up with a sturdy bolted-on plate, and the remaining 3 sides with leather bellows, allowing an all-round weather-protected connection. Innovative, and the forerunner of the first D-Zugwagen only a couple years later, but just like the 3-axle bogies, not yet ready for a wide implementation, as connecting up multiple coaches this way is a very labor-intensive and awkward process. Not even to mention that the necessary parts, as well as the steel covers for the unconnected ends of the first and the final coach, have to be stored somewhere, and they certainly do not fit in the small spare part compartments underneath the frame, where also the gas tanks for the lamps can be found. The young Wilhelm, however, should never receive his saloon coach as a prince, as 1888 became the fabled Dreikaiserjahr, the year of the 3 emperors. Wilhelm I passed away in March, and in June, after only 99 days as Friedrich III, followed his son, thus leaving the crown to Wilhelm II, Prussia's last king and the final German emperor. In the Breslau works this caused a bit of a last-minute racket, as a lot of the opulent interior design work, tailored to a prince, had now to be changed reflecting the new role as king and emperor, delaying the delivery to 1889. But with the new role was also the concept of the coach as a standalone vehicle out of the window, and a complete train should follow soon after. But that has to wait for another video, or rather multiple, as there's still a lot to say about the royal train, its whereabouts, as well as about the Reisekaiser himself, the traveling emperor, as he was often mocked by his contemporaries. I have to thank the commissioner of the royal series, as well as all of my channel members, including Contrian, Dan Menden, Dave Heise, Flip Schwip, Kay Frankly, Lucas Ilskens, Martin Wigiken, Søren Dominic Cook, Steamy Player and Void Elder, for enabling me to keep this channel running.